the spring of 2016, a man was living on a quiet, semi-urban farm property in Hawaii. He had recently moved to this beautiful, isolated spot to escape the noise of the city and enjoy a peaceful, simple life. The property was surrounded by lush green mountains and sat on a landscape of rich, red volcanic soil. It seemed like the perfect place to relax. But after living there for just a few months, he began to notice some very strange things that he could not easily explain. The most unusual thing of all was his phone's wireless connection. Normally, on a rural farm in Hawaii, you would expect to see maybe one or two Wi-Fi networks, usually belonging to your own house, or perhaps a close neighbor if they were within range. But when this man opened his phone's settings to connect to his own router, he was shocked to see a massive list of 25 to 30 different Wi-Fi networks. They all had decent low-strength signals, and they were all active at the exact same time. This made absolutely no sense given how isolated the property was from any other homes in the area. And so, on April 21st, 2016, he decided to write a post on Reddit, specifically in the Black Ops subreddit, to see if anyone could help him make sense of this bizarre situation. He asked the community why there would be about 30 Wi-Fi networks seemingly emanating from directly under a concrete pad on his property. At first, some people in the comments thought it was just a technical glitch or some kind of strange coincidence. But the man was determined to find out the truth. He went out and downloaded a Wi-Fi analyzer tool on his phone to map the signal strength of these mysterious networks. He began walking in concentric circles around his property, watching the signal meter closely. As he walked further away from a specific concrete pad on the ground, the signal grew weaker. As he walked closer to it, the signal peaked. It was clear that the source of all 30 networks was originating from directly underneath this concrete pad. To make things even stranger, the names of these Wi-Fi networks, the SSIDs, would completely change every 5 minutes or so. It was like whatever was buried down there was constantly cycling through different names and identities to keep people from connecting or tracking them. The concrete pad itself was very unusual. It was located on a spot that was supposed to just be a simple cover for gravel and dirt, and there was no obvious reason for any technology or equipment to be buried there. The man decided to take his investigation a step further. He managed to get his hands on a thermal imaging camera to see if there was any heat coming from the ground. When he scanned the concrete pad, he noticed a very distinct, localized hotspot. It was significantly hotter than the surrounding concrete. To test if this hotspot was connected to some kind of underground cavity, he took a hammer drill and a masonry bit. He decided to drill a hole directly on top of the hotspot, and then he drilled several other holes in different areas of the concrete pad to serve as controls. Once the holes were made, he filled each of them with water. To his absolute surprise, the water in the control holes just sat there and overflowed, which is what you would expect with solid concrete. But the water poured into the hole directly over the hotspot instantly drained away, disappearing deep into the earth. Later that same day, other Reddit users started asking him if there was any power source nearby that could be running whatever was under the concrete pad. The man replied by reporting that there were power lines in the area, but they were actually disconnected from the city's main grid. Instead, the cables ran toward a steel frame building owned by a very wealthy neighbor. He also mentioned that during World War II, the entire mountain area had been heavily used by the military. Even though official databases did not list any active military bases in that exact location, the man was convinced there were hidden underground facilities left behind from the war. As the online discussion grew, users asked for photos of the area. The man uploaded several pictures that only made the mystery deeper. One photo showed a complex multi-breaker electrical setup, where a lower conduit ran directly under the asphalt and toward the peak signal location where the hotspot was. He also shared a photo of the hole that drained water and a strange, empty chemical bucket he found on the property. He said the bucket immediately reminded him of the body disposal scenes from the television show Breaking Bad, where characters used strong chemicals to dissolve evidence. When users asked if there was any way to measure the thickness of the concrete pad, because if the heat was coming from below, you would expect it to dissipate and not stay as focused as it seemed, the man posted another photo. It showed that the concrete pad was about twice as thick as the concrete in the surrounding area. He explained that the pad was incredibly hard and seemed to have heavy river rocks mixed in, whereas the surrounding area did not, and was easy to drill through with a standard hammer drill and a masonry bit. As the user tried his best to drill into the pad, he managed to get to approximately 2 feet away from the hotspot location. According to him, the heat was completely unbearable there. He compared it to the inside of a composting bin, but there were no signs of microbial activity. He also noted that the soil was red volcanic dirt, which should not have any biological activity anyway. The comment thread eventually ended, but not before the man shared a few more chilling details. He tried to connect to the Wi-Fi networks, but they were all password protected, and he could not crack them. He also noticed that a nearby municipal storm drain had recently been removed, and a brand new, much larger one had been built directly opposite his property line. He believed this massive drain could easily serve as a secret entrance to an underground area of some sort. On top of that, he observed a truck making late-night trips to dump broken, fresh-looking concrete into the neighbors' trash bins. But the most alarming connection came when he started researching his old boss. He discovered that his boss's personal account was linked to an active eBay seller profile named Chai Bei. This eBay account had incredibly bizarre and suspicious feedback and reviews, mostly involving the sale of broken or faulty hard drives. People wondered why anyone would want to buy broken hard drives unless they were using them to hide encrypted data or trade illegal material. Almost as soon as the man pointed this out, the eBay account's feedback was suddenly set to private, meaning someone knew he was watching. The mystery eventually got linked to the viral Pizzagate conspiracy theory of 2016, which claimed there was a hidden network operating in secret underground locations. Some people began to fear for the man's safety, but he replied online saying he was in a good spot and that they would not get him easily. After that, he went silent. Later, his former boss commented on the situation, claiming the man suffered from severe mental health issues and had once ripped his own ceiling fan out because he thought he was being watched. The boss claimed there was no conspiracy at all, and that there were no real connections as to why the user would suddenly intrude and link his boss's account to the eBay seller. Of course, the boss could be lying because nearly everything discussed in the story had some form of evidence attached to it. Nevertheless, this mystery will remain unsolved. Now, sometimes the mysteries we encounter online are much closer to home, and they carry a far more immediate sense of real-world danger. On Tuesday, December 16, 2025, a user made a post in a popular home maintenance community on Reddit. The post was so strange and alarming that the moderators of the group deleted it within an hour of it being uploaded. However, an eagle-eyed viewer managed to take a screenshot of the post before it disappeared forever, and they sent it to me on December 23rd. The post itself was incredibly simple but deeply unsettling. The user wrote that he had cut himself very badly inside his rented apartment. He said that fortunately he was all right, and the bleeding had stopped, but he really did not want to notify his landlord about the damage to the walls. He asked the community what kind of cleaning products or tools he would need to make the stain completely disappear from the drywall. Accompanying the text was a photo of the wall, and anyone who looked at it for more than a second could tell that something was seriously wrong. The blood on the wall was not from a simple cut on a finger or an arm. It was a highly unusual, heavy blood splatter pattern. It was spread across a wide area and sat at a height that suggested a violent struggle. The poster had been very vague about how exactly he had injured himself, but for blood to spray across a wall in that specific shape, it would have required a massive, deep laceration, like a graphic accident with a large knife. Even more concerning was a noticeable chip in the plaster, right in the dead center of the thickest part of the blood splatter. This physical detail implied that the blood had not simply sprayed onto the wall from a cut artery. Instead, it looked as though a blunt object, or perhaps a person's head or limb, had violently struck the wall, chipping the plaster and depositing a heavy amount of blood at the point of impact. When other users began to look into the poster's history to see who they were dealing with, the details became even more alarming. The user was an active poster in an alcoholism support group, where he had recently admitted to getting heavily drunk an average of 5 days a week. But the most devastating detail came from a post he had made just 1 month prior, in November. In that post, he explained that his girlfriend had recently cheated on him and left him because of his severe drinking habits. To make things even more tragic, she had walked out on him just days before the engagement ring he had ordered for her finally arrived in the mail. When the viewer who rescued the post saw all of these pieces coming together, they immediately posted the information in the Reddit Bureau of Investigation, a community dedicated to solving real-life mysteries and reporting potential crimes. As soon as the original poster realized people were investigating his history and connecting the dots between his missing ex-girlfriend, his drinking problems, and the violent blood splatter on his apartment wall, he immediately blocked the person who shared it, even though they had never directly contacted him. Shortly after that, his entire account was deactivated. Whether this was just a series of incredibly unfortunate coincidences, or if a desperate man was trying to cover up a terrible act of violence committed against his cheating ex-girlfriend during a drunken rage, we may never know. The post remains a chilling digital ghost, leaving behind a haunting question that has never been answered. While some internet mysteries leave us with nothing but theories, there are other times when the truth actually does catch up. And when it does, it can be far more terrifying than any ghost story. In 2016, a Reddit user named RandomGirl2You began posting a series of updates about some very strange things happening in her home. She lived in a fairly large house located in a small, isolated community of only about 400 people. Because it was such a tiny town, life moved very slowly, and people rarely felt the need to lock their doors. She went about her daily routine like she always did. She was a very clean person, almost to an obsessive degree, and she spent a lot of time sweeping her dark, ebony-stained wood floors. She did this because the dark wood would show even the tiniest speck of dust or dirt. One afternoon, she was sweeping near her bedroom. In her bedroom, there was a glass door that led directly out to a small back porch. As she approached the door, she suddenly stopped dead in her tracks. Lying right there on the dark wood floor was a single human tooth. She stood frozen, staring down at it in absolute disbelief. She knew for a fact that the tooth had not been there earlier in the day. She was so confused that she actually stood there running her tongue along her own teeth, wondering if she had somehow hit her head, forgotten about it, and lost a tooth without realizing. But all of her teeth were perfectly intact. She posted about the bizarre find online, and other users immediately warned her that she might have a squatter living secretly inside her house. At first, she did not want to believe it, but as she thought about it, she realized that several other odd things had been happening lately. Small personal items had gone missing, furniture seemed slightly out of place, and she had been hearing faint noises that she had previously dismissed as the house settling. Because she lived so far out in the middle of nowhere, she knew it would take a very long time for anyone to come out and help her. So, despite the obvious danger, she decided to investigate the house on her own. She began to search every room, and eventually, she stood beneath the ceiling hatch that led up into her dark attic. When she looked closely at the edges of the opening, she noticed a faint dark smudge on the wood, as if someone had recently grabbed the frame to pull themselves up. She brought a chair over, stood on it, and listened in total silence for a long time. She did not hear a sound. Over the next few days, she decided to get a taller ladder and a powerful flashlight so she could finally look inside. She was actually uniquely prepared for this kind of situation. She worked as an enforcement officer for the local Game and Fish Commission, so she had professional training in dealing with potentially hostile situations. But she was still a relatively small woman, living completely alone in the wilderness. And the thought of what might be waiting in the dark was terrifying. When she finally climbed up and shined her light into the attic, she did not see a person, but she saw undeniable proof that someone had been making themselves at home. Scattered across the wooden beams were 8 beer koozies, a small pile of loose change, a $20 bill, and several of her own personal items that had disappeared months ago. She immediately contacted the local sheriff, whom she knew well because of her job and the small size of the town. The police arrived, took photos, and dusted the area for fingerprints. After a thorough investigation of the attic space, the sheriff sat her down and delivered some news that made her blood run cold. Based on the dust patterns and the sheer volume of items left behind, The police determined that someone had been living in her attic for a very, very long time. But the most horrifying detail was how they were doing it. This was not a typical squatter who stayed in the house while the owner was away at work. The evidence showed that this person only entered the attic when she was home. They were actively watching her, coming down into her living space while she slept, and retreating back into the ceiling whenever she was awake. It was not just a case of trespassing. It was a highly targeted, deeply disturbing case of stalking. The young woman immediately had all the locks on her doors replaced, but the nightmare was far from over. Around the same time, she began receiving highly explicit, unsolicited photos on her phone from an unknown number. It was never confirmed who actually sent them. When she went to the police station to check on the progress of the investigation and look at the evidence they had collected from her attic, she was completely sickened by what they had found. Tucked away in the dark corners of the ceiling rafters were two giant glass pickle jars. Both of them were filled to the brim with human semen. There were also thousands of used tissues, discarded maroon socks, and moist towelettes scattered everywhere. But what broke her heart and terrified her the most was a pile of her own clothing that had gone missing over the course of an entire year. Among the clothes were several pairs of her underwear. The stalker had been stealing her intimate garments, taking them up into the dark space directly above her head, and using them while she slept peacefully just a few feet below. There were also strange, inexplicable items up there too, including a plastic toy butterfly, a wooden turtle bobblehead, and heavy black and pink straps with Velcro on the ends. A few days later, she received a call that was supposed to put her mind at ease, that should have answered all her questions and proven that the perpetrator was caught and the nightmare was over. But instead, the identity of the intruder would haunt her for the rest of her life. It turned out to be her 70-year-old next-door neighbor. He was married to the same woman for countless years, a respected church deacon, a father of 4 children, and a grandfather of 6. This one is perhaps one of the more uncomfortable reminders to simply lock your doors at all times, as it is the easiest and most obvious preventative measure you can take. Our final story takes us across the ocean to the beautiful, rugged countryside of North Wales in the United Kingdom. It is a place known for its stunning green hills, dramatic coastlines, and quiet, historic villages. But for teenagers growing up in these isolated rural areas, life can get incredibly boring. With very few entertainment options, local teens often spend their free time wandering the fields, helping out with livestock, harvesting crops, and exploring the landscape. Out of pure boredom, a teenage boy and 3 of his closest friends would often spend their evenings walking along the coast and the railway lines. Running right along the coastline is a major road with 2 separate lanes connecting Wales to England, and directly alongside it run the active train tracks. At various points, these tracks cross over small concrete bridges. One night, the group of friends was hanging out near one of these concrete bridges where the trains passed overhead. As they were exploring the base of the structure, they noticed a heavy, rusted manhole cover set into the ground nearby. It looked like it had not been opened in years. They realized it likely led to some kind of internal maintenance room built into the bridge itself. They tried to pry it open with their bare hands, but the heavy steel disc would not budge. Determined to see what was inside, they promised to return the next night with the proper tools. The following evening, they crept back to the bridge under the cover of darkness. They had to be extremely careful and quiet. Even though the area was sparsely populated, trains still passed by regularly. If a train conductor spotted a group of teenagers tampering with a manhole right next to the tracks, they would immediately radio it in, and the police would be waiting for them. Working quickly in the dark, they managed to unbolt the heavy cover. They slid the steel plate aside, revealing a dark vertical shaft with a metal ladder leading down into the pitch blackness. Without hesitating, the boys climbed down one by one. When they reached the bottom, they found themselves in a narrow, incredibly tight concrete corridor that ran inside the structure of the bridge. To move forward, they had to squeeze and crouch, pressing their chests and stomachs against the rough concrete walls. The air was thick and dusty, and a heavy sense of claustrophobia began to settle over them. The corridor was much longer than they expected, stretching out into the dark. But about halfway through, They looked down and saw narrow slits in the concrete floor. Through these gaps, they could see the headlights of cars passing on the road directly beneath them. It was a bizarre sensation, being hidden inside the very bridge that drivers were passing under, completely unaware of their presence. This view gave the boys a brief sense of comfort, and they kept pushing forward. But as they neared the end of the long, cramped walkway, one of the friends in the front stopped. He whispered that he could see something up ahead in the darkness. They slowly crept forward to the very end of the corridor, and when the user shined his light onto the final wall, a wave of pure horror washed over them. Sitting in the middle of the narrow concrete space was a single, cheap folding chair. It was positioned directly in front of the wall. On the concrete wall, someone had taped a torn page from an adult magazine showing a completely nude woman in a highly provocative pose. But when the boys looked closer, they realized the image had been violently defaced. The woman's eyes had been completely cut out of the paper, leaving empty, dark holes where her gaze should have been. And directly beneath the picture, lying on the cold concrete floor, was a freshly discarded bloody condom. The realization of what this room was being used for hit them all at once. This was not just a secret hangout spot. It was a hidden, insulated chamber where someone was coming in total isolation to act out incredibly dark, violent, and highly disturbing fantasies. Terrified that the owner of the chair might return at any second and trap them inside the narrow tunnel, the boys turned around and scrambled back through the corridor as fast as they physically could. They squeezed through the tight spaces, scraping their skin against the concrete, praying that no one had closed the manhole cover above them. Fortunately, the exit was still open. They scrambled up the ladder, slid the heavy cover back into place, and ran all the way home without saying a word. Living in a tiny countryside community where everyone knew everyone else, the boys were too terrified to tell their parents or the police what they had found, fearing the monster who built that room might find out who they were. The user later went back to the area a few times to see if anything had changed, but he eventually stopped, realizing that some secrets are better left undisturbed in the dark. But the story of the concrete pad in Hawaii didn't quite end with the Reddit thread. Let's take a look at the bizarre aftermath of this case. After the user stopped posting, local residents began to pay closer attention to the property. Some people reported hearing low-frequency humming noises coming from the area late at night. Others noticed that the wealthy neighbor's steel frame building had an unusually high number of security cameras installed around its perimeter, far more than what a normal farm building would ever need. Some conspiracy theorists online tried to link the site to illegal crypto mining operations, claiming that the 30 Wi-Fi networks were being used to transmit data from hidden mining rigs buried underground, which would also explain the extreme heat coming from the soil. However, the mystery of why the power lines were disconnected from the main grid, but still carrying voltage, remained unexplained. It is highly possible that a private generator was running deep underground, completely independent of the public infrastructure. Without a proper search warrant, local authorities could not legally enter the property to excavate the concrete pad, leaving the secrets of what lies beneath the Hawaiian soil locked away forever. And when we look back at the apartment blood splatter, the timeline of events becomes even more chilling. Following the deletion of the Reddit post on December 16, 2025, several online sleuths began checking local police blotters and missing persons registries in the area where the poster was believed to reside. They discovered that a young woman matching the description of his ex-girlfriend had indeed been reported missing by her family just days before the post appeared. She had uncharacteristically cut off all communication with her loved ones, and her phone had gone completely dead. When friends went to her apartment, they found her belongings untouched, but she was nowhere to be found. The local police were contacted about the suspicious home maintenance post, but because the account had already been completely deleted, and the poster had used a virtual private network to mask his IP address, tracking down his physical location proved to be an incredibly difficult task for the Cyber Crimes Unit. To this day, investigators are still trying to determine if the blood on that apartment wall belonged to a man who had a terrible drunken accident, or if it was the final tragic evidence of a crime that was successfully swept under the rug, For random girl to you, the arrest of her 70-year-old neighbor did not bring immediate peace of mind. Even though the old man was finally removed from the property and faced multiple charges of stalking, breaking and entering, and voyeurism, the psychological trauma of knowing he had been watching her for so long remained. She found it incredibly difficult to sleep in her own home, constantly staring up at the ceiling hatch, waiting for the sound of floorboards creaking. She eventually decided to sell the house and move to a different state, hoping to start over in a place where she could feel safe again. Her story spread throughout the small community, leaving the residents shocked and deeply divided. Many of the neighbors who had known the church deacon for decades refused to believe the allegations, despite the overwhelming physical and forensic evidence found in the attic. They simply could not accept that the friendly, grandfatherly figure they saw every Sunday was capable of such deeply depraved behavior. It is a harsh reminder of how easily monsters can hide in plain sight, using their stellar reputations in the community to commit the most horrific acts behind closed doors. As for the teenagers in North Wales, the discovery inside the concrete bridge stayed with them for the rest of their lives. Years after the event, one of the friends finally decided to speak to a retired local police officer about what they had found that night. The officer listened intently and revealed that during the time the boys were exploring, there had been a series of unsolved assaults in the region. The police had suspected that a transient predator was operating along the coastal highway, using the train tracks and the bridges to move undetected between towns. It was highly likely that the maintenance room inside the concrete bridge was being used as a temporary hideout or a staging ground for these crimes. The officer admitted that if the boys had reported the discovery immediately, the forensic team might have been able to recover DNA from the bloody condom or the carved magazine page, which could have led to an arrest. By the time they spoke out, the rain and damp air had long since destroyed any usable evidence, and the secret chamber remained just another cold case in the archives of the North Wales Police Department. Looking at all of these stories, we are left with a lingering sense of unease. They remind us that the world is full of hidden spaces, both online and in the physical world around us, where dark things can happen completely out of sight, whether it is a concrete pad on a Hawaiian farm, a deleted post on an internet forum, a dark attic above a bedroom, or a hollow space inside a train bridge. The truth is often much closer and much stranger than we would ever like to admit. The next time you walk past an unusual concrete structure, or hear a strange noise in your ceiling, or see a bizarre post online, remember that sometimes the things we think are just wild theories or minor coincidences are actually the keys to unlocking a much darker reality. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you thought of today's episode in the comments. And remember, we have a whole playlist of true crime episodes ready for you to binge right now. Until next time, see ya.